28 minutes later, and now you need that field goal to actually win the game to put you into the playoffs. The only variable at that point that is any different, if allowed, is the kicker's emotional toughness. Because everything else is the same as it was right before the half ended. But now there's stakes. It matters if he misses this kick or not. Now everybody in the stadium, everybody on both teams, coaches, everybody is watching this one player kick this one ball. And nobody at that point is thinking, well, I wonder what his SAT score was.
Welcome to the Second Plan A podcast, where we take hard-earned lessons from the Mets and convert them into tools for navigating life's challenges. I'm Amber Hoover. I'd rather stick to the plan.
And I am Ryan Hoover, and I have no idea what the plan is.
So today we are moving on to our second Plan A. All right. A lion doesn't hunt the toughest and fastest gazelle. And likewise, as humans, we prefer to find an easy way, the path of least resistance. We idolize it through fairy tales and fables, constantly looking for the genie who will grant us 3 wishes, so we can wish for unlimited wishes, obviously. But what if the easy path stories aren't the ones we should be paying attention to, and we should be looking more towards the horror genre for our lessons on taking the easy road? As anyone who has read The Monkey's Paw will tell you, getting what you wish for is rarely the easy solution. So let's start there, with the concept of easy and what that looks like, or doesn't look like, on the mats. That wasn't too bad. That wasn't a 3-minute intro. It was only 1 minute, right? We're good.
I feel like you didn't really need to read it, but...
You thought I didn't need to read that?
Nah.
Listen, I already had to ad-lib some of it because I didn't read it exactly as it was, and...
So you didn't follow the plan?
You can't see me sweating, but I was sweating.
So you didn't follow the plan?
Luckily, I can still think on my feet, even though I'd rather just stick to the plan and read it as it is, but that's not always what happens.
Yeah, your generation doesn't do that very well.
There's a lot about this generation and the generation we raised, but let's talk about the concept of easy and what that looks like or doesn't look like on the mats. So you're pretty well known for the phrase simple, not easy.
Yeah.
That's probably a best place to start. Tell me about that phrase, where it fits in the fighting world.
Everywhere. Anything that's, I think, functional, repeatable, sustainable under duress is technically pretty simple. But as soon as you understand the nature of violence, you understand that very little is actually easy. So the idea of something technically, mechanically being relatively simple doesn't necessarily and rarely, really, when it comes to violence, equate to it being an easy thing to pull off in real world kind of application. Jeff Thompson used to say that things that really work in self-defense or street fighting, you can write on the back of a postage stamp. And they were all really easy, simple things. And if you look at UFC, and we've talked about this before, the vast, vast majority of fights are finished one of about 4 or 5 ways. And they are mostly white belt jiu-jitsu moves or basic boxing, kickboxing. It's super, super rare that it's one of the more complicated kind of moves or movements. Now, what I think that means is because really good people recognize that it's the simpler things that are generally more successful, what that means is you have to be much better at them than everybody else. If you look at football, American football, you still see people run it up the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the absolute simplest plays there is, but look at how many people end up on the line doing everything they can to try to stop that run. And that run is designed to get you a yard, half a yard, maybe 2 yards, whatever. So it's relatively simple. Everybody runs it, but that doesn't mean that it's easy to actually do, That's why it gets a yard or a half yard or whatever, because it's not easy, but it couldn't get more simple, I don't think.
Football is a funny example for you to bring up for me, because I always giggle a little bit at the fact that you've got 4 downs, really, so you need like 2 1/4 yards a down. That's all you'd have to do, is if you could be consistent, 2 1/4, 2 1/4, 2 1/4. I mean, that game would be butter.
Yep.
But it's
all you have to do.
Not the way it works. Yeah.
Well, look. We just you were with me the other day, and I was having a conversation with one of the winningest NFL coaches of all time. And we were talking about coaching. And at no point were we talking X's and O's. At no point were we talking execution of moves or movements or drills or anything like that. But it was all about coaching. It was all about...
It was all mindset.
Yeah, it was all about what I think of as the X factor, the emotional kind of toughness that is required to get somebody from being mediocre or good to great. And so when you think, well, 2.5 yards, 2.5 yards, 2.5, it's like, yeah, that's technically simple. But then you recognize, okay, but I have 53 players. I have half a dozen, 10 coordinators and assistant coaches and all these kinds of things that I have to manage, and I have to understand not only everything that I can about football, but about personalities and about how to make sure I put the right person in at the right play, not necessarily just because they're the best athlete, but maybe they handle pressure a little bit better, these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And so on the 30,000 foot level, it's like, well, 2.5 yards, do that 4 times, easy, simple. But then once you zoom in and you put it under a microscope, it's like, holy crap, there's a whole lot that goes into
there are a lot of moving parts
getting
to
that,
get that
2.5 yards, consistently. So that's kind of what I think of when I talk in terms of simple, not easy. Simple being the X's and O's, these steps, the A to B kind of thing. Easy being all of the variables that certainly will start to manifest as you go to try to execute those X's and O's, that A to B, those 1, 2, 3 steps.
Things with large stakes don't usually have that easy element to them.
Yeah. Yes. It's and again, we were talking about this when I was talking to Coach the other day. It's like, if you're going to kick a field goal and you're a field goal kicker, and everybody that's a field goal kicker in the NFL is a very good field goal kicker. The worst guy in the NFL is better than, a number I can't even fathom in comparison to the rest of the world. Yeah. And the goalposts are the same size. They're the same color. The ball is the same. Turf may vary, but it's the same ball, the same shape, the same size, deflate gate.
I was literally thinking, I was about to say #deflate gate.
And so when you're thinking, okay, well, we're going to go ahead and kick this 30-yard field goal at the end of the half because we're up by 27 already. It puts us up by 30. There's little to no stress on that kicker whatsoever. And so he can go out and kick that the way that he would kick it in practice. I mean, realistically, if that's...
Yeah.
Same field, same ball, same field goal, same kicker, same crowd, same opponent, 28 minutes later, and now you need that field goal to actually win the game to put you into the playoffs. The only variable at that point that is any different, if allowed, is the kicker's emotional toughness. Because everything else is the same as it was right before the half ended. But now there's stakes. It matters if he misses this kick or not. Before it didn't really matter. Not really.
Yeah.
Now, everybody in the stadium, everybody on both teams, coaches, everybody is watching this one player kick this one ball, And nobody at that point is thinking, well, I wonder what his SAT score was, Because everybody says mental toughness. But it's not really that. It's emotions. I recognize that everything that we just named off is exactly the same as it was, 29 minutes ago, whatever. And I go kick it just like I kicked it before, or just like I've done every time in practice. Or if I've missed the last 3 field goals, can I recognize that has absolutely no bearing whatsoever on the next one, unless I allow it to.
Yeah, I give it. We're kind of back to the situation versus disposition that we talked about last episode, where kick that ball through those big giant metal posts. Really simple and relatively easy, if we're talking about somebody who's trained to do it.
Yeah.
But then as you start giving more context, start setting up the disposition, that's when simple still stands true, but it's no longer easy.
And I mean, even that's all relative, right? Because you said somebody that's trained to do it. You go pick the next 100 people that you meet and have them go try to kick a 20-yard field goal. And I would be willing to bet a whole lot of money not one of them would do it successfully their first time.
At least 80% will think they could.
Dudes, yeah.
Fair.
None of them would be able to.
You've come down into this kind of micro level where now we're talking about the reps, putting in the work and putting in the effort, which again has a really simple setup and structure to it, really even easy. But as you get to your 4th rep and 5th rep, it's very different than when you get to your 400th and your 500th, and you keep going in that direction. It's the Bruce Lee quote, "I fear not a man who's practiced 1,000 kicks, but practiced one kick 1,000 times" kind of idea, where to get good, it's not about some super flashy, crazy thing. It's the repetitive, monotonous work, rep after rep after rep.
Yeah. And that's why, people talk about, well, motivation really isn't the thing that keeps people going, right? It might get them started, but it's not what keeps them going. It's the discipline. It's the wherewithal, the emotional toughness to go do it again and again and again and again. And no matter how technically simple the thing is, if you haven't put the reps in, it will never be easy to actually pull off when you need it. We talked about this in Copenhagen, the idea of teaching somebody how to drive a stick shift, a manual, and how technically it's super easy, push in the clutch, put the thing in gear, give it enough gas and let off the clutch enough and it'll go.
Yeah.
And and obviously I could explain it better than that, but you could explain it to perfection. And I'm willing to bet that whoever you're explaining it to is going to stall it out the next 40 times before they get it to move 6 feet and then they stall it again,
Yeah.
Because while it's technically simple, that doesn't mean that it's easy in terms of being able to take the information and apply it,
Yeah.
Because ultimately you have to feel what that is like. You can't have somebody explain it to you well enough that your feet will understand it. And even then, you take that same person, they've done it for 2 hours, and finally they're getting to go, and they're getting into second, and maybe they're getting into third, and then you put them out in traffic, and that's going to change things. Or then you put them out in traffic at a stoplight on a hill, and now this part and this part, it's all the same. It did not change at all. It's the same clutch, the same gas pedal, the same stick shift, the same feet, the same hands. The stakes are greatly different.
No thanks to taking a manual out in traffic for me.
Because as humans, we have I think we are very risk averse, generally speaking, especially now. We struggle with, as variables increase or as the stakes go higher, being able to recognize that this is the same clutch, this is the same frame it in our minds in a way that we recognize the only thing that's changed is my feelings about this.
Right. That's what we talk about with coaching too, not getting out there and telling every single detail about the straight punch, because one, it's not going to help them get their punches better. They've just got to get out there and do it. You give them enough information to get them working. And eventually something that feels complicated right at the start, even though as the coach, it's easy, or it's simple at least, they'll eventually get to the point where that has become simple. And then what do? You add pressure, you add stakes, you put it into sparring. And what was simple has now become difficult again. And then as they adjust and acclimate to that, you find more pressures and keep building it up that way. And I can say that sitting here thinking about driving a manual, because I'm like, okay, I get where people end up being able to do this. I'm like, this is a lot to think about right now. But having found some success with feeling out the gear shifts, I'm like, oh, okay. I get where time will start allowing me to feel this easier, and it gets to a point where it's simple and you can do it driving 80 miles an hour down an interstate with cars around you and different things going on that you have to pay attention to.
Yeah. When I was 17 into 18, summer after my senior year in high school, I worked at the Lazy Five Ranch, and I learned to drive on a manual, on a stick shift. My grandmother taught me on a Ford Ranger, and I'd gotten, I was very comfortable. I'd been driving for a couple years by then. then I've got this job at the Lazy Five, and they had their house and the property on their house, and they had the ranch, and they were relatively close together, but you still had to drive from one to the next. And Henry Hampton was the number one of the five. And I remember him coming to me one afternoon and he said, "Hey, I want you to take that Barrett trailer over to the ranch." So it was a dually F-350. So it's a pretty big extended cab, crew cab truck, and a Barrett trailer that was big enough to hold 4 draft horses. So we had Belgians that we used to give hay rides. I drove at the time, a 1990 Ford Mustang. So we're talking about a 2-door, you know. Those are very different things. And I had very limited experience with driving a truck with a trailer. A little, but very limited. But nothing like this. Huge truck, huge trailer, live horses in the trailer. And he looks at me and he goes, "The brakes are a little soft. If it gets away from you, just aim for something cheap."
This was a test. They were like, let's see if this guy's dumb enough to get in this vehicle.
And so, simple, not easy. Still the steering wheel, still the clutch, still a gas pedal, still a gear shift. The totality of the circumstances, however, were quite different than, you know, the Ford Mustang I'd been driving for a couple of years, or even the little Ford Ranger in my grandparents' business's parking lot. You know,
our lives are so different.
I've led a few lives, to be fair.
I've never led a life where I went from a Ford Mustang to a giant souped-up truck with a horse trailer and horses in it, by the way.
It had a huge dent, and so again, it was a crew cab. So one of the driver's side back doors you couldn't open because it had been bashed in by a rhinoceros.
When you said Henry, I thought that was going to be an animal name.
Nope,
but
Henry Hampton. I mean, he was bigger than a gorilla. I kid you not. I saw him and one other guy one time just go pick up a full-grown adult ostrich, and let me tell you something. Ostriches are huge, and they are not to be effed with. And this man just walked right up to this thing and just picked it up and put it in a trailer.
Ain't got time for that.
No, and that's what it was. This ostrich had been chasing people, and like it ended up chasing people underneath cars and trucks and whatnot. Henry was not having it.
This was not in the outline, but that made me think of a video we shared this week that would really play well with the simple, not easy idea. And when you said Henry was bigger than a gorilla, it made me think of our anonymous friend on the internet teaching people to just bump them with their shoulder. And this dude is every bit of, what, 350 maybe? I mean, this is a giant dude.
He's 320, 340. I mean, he's not very tall, I don't think.
No.
But he is quite broad, and he's teaching basically like shoulder blocking into somebody to knock them off and create space. And he's talking about how, you know, how simple it is, how easy it is, how you can do this and then you can do that. I'm like, yes.
You can.
And even for me, it's technically simple.
It is very simple.
It would be the equivalent. If I did this to him, I promise you I wouldn't budge him.
He wouldn't move him. That's literally what I pictured. I'm like, okay, teach me to do that to you. Especially if your expectation is to push the other person back. Like maybe if I'm trying to bounce myself off you.
I've trained a lot of NFL players, and
it's a different species.
I don't think there's any of them that I could have hit with my shoulder and moved them. You know, so yeah, that's a good simple, not easy kind of.
Or you need to fight children so that you can shoulder check them.
I mean,
I guess everything has its kind of.
You should always fight people that are smaller and weaker.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I choose.
That's just smart.
Why do you think I teach the little kids class? I can take them all at once.
Fight smaller, weaker, slower people.
Little and old.
That's just smart.
Well, we're done here.
I don't know about the old part.
Well, that's
you try to shoulder block Buster like that, and you're gonna bounce off.
Older than Buster. Okay, that got me a little off track, but it was very applicable. Actually, I'm gonna stay on social media videos. You sent me and Eli a video of Justin Flores, grappling an experienced grappler throwing him,
toying with,
just playing with him like a cat with a toy. And so you look at someone doing something very technical, yes, still simple, but to the majority of people, not easy, but he makes it look so effortless.
Well, and I think that's almost a problem, because I think for a lot of people, he does it so effortlessly that they do think,
well, that's
I
easy.
could do that, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, like, all he did was grab
He
his
picked
head
up his leg and
grab his
swept
head
his
and
foot.
kicked
Like,
his,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
and I'm watching it thinking, and I put this in the like, I feel like if I grappled with him, I would feel like I had never grappled a day in my life.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
And I've been
you
doing
would.
it for a long time. And I'm like, he's taken simple to such a level that it looks effortless. And it's just that he is so good at the fundamental understanding of principles and kazushi, and, you know, I mean, look, he's very technical too, and like he's a very good coach and all that kind of stuff, but he is so good at the basics, the simple things. But when you know what you're looking at, it's like art. I mean, it's like a dance. It's like, and I've seen many videos with him like this where he's working with really good people. I mean, these are not, you know, 4-month white belts he's working with. These are high-level grapplers, and he's literally making them look like they've never grappled a day in their lives.
It's funny because if you watch him, he's flowing, he's smooth. You can tell he's very feeling out the energy. And if you watch the other person, they're scrambling, they're behind, they're reacting to his feel, which gives him the chance to stay ahead.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what you have to be.
It perpetuates it.
Yeah.
Right? It's your zeal to try to hurry to get back that last sweep or that last snap down or whatever. You give him exactly what he needs to continue the next sweep, the next snap down, the next back take, the next, you know, whatever. And again, I think that comes down a bit to emotional toughness, in that he has been there so much and so often that he has the ability to kind of, even if on the inside he's, because I don't know, even if on the inside he's going 1,000 miles an hour, his affect on the outside is very much not that. And that in and of itself, if you allow it to, can be emotionally very draining and taxing, because you're giving this guy your best, everything that you've got, and he doesn't look like he's trying.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And the harder you try with somebody like that, the easier it becomes for him.
Yeah. So we hit emotional toughness on both sides at that point. And, you know, the video you sent, the setup was, it looked like they had just gotten done with a class or a seminar or something, and it's not just a bunch of people rolling, it's everybody sitting watching those two. And so if you're J-Flow, and again, I don't know on the inside what's happening, but at the very least, you've got somebody recording you. You know what's going on the internet. You've got a lot of people sitting there watching you. There's a performance element of that. There's I can make or break myself in this moment.
Yeah.
Actually, the stakes suck because you can't necessarily make yourself in that moment, really. Like, he's done that
because everybody
over years,
expects
and
the video
expect,
to look exactly the way that it ended up looking.
So you only have break. Like, there's really only downside for him.
Yeah.
But he's confident and incredible, and you know, does well.
And understands, because at the end of the day, I think you get to, or you should get to a point where you're so good and you have such a good understanding of what it takes to be at that level, that you understand that sometimes you're going to slip, sometimes you're going to fall, sometimes the other guy's going to get the sweep. You know, your timing is going to be, because at that level, timing can be a quarter second off, and you're the one that gets thrown instead of the one that does the throw.
Even if the other person didn't even intend to throw you, you know, it can look like that other person knew what they were doing better and that kind of thing. Yeah. It was interesting because within that video, he missed a foot sweep, and he didn't seem to let it phase him. And that's another hallmark for these emotionally tough people who don't let the past influence the future, where it has no dictation, really.
Michael Jordan could have missed 10 shots in a row, and the 11th shot, if it was going to be the game on the line, I can promise you he wanted the ball, because he's not thinking about the last 10 shots. I'm willing to bet that it never entered into his mind, damn, I missed 10 shots in a row. Should I really be the one to take this shot?
Yeah,
no, he went into the huddle during the timeout, and he's like, get me the ball. And that's, I think, And this is part of the conversation I was having with Coach the other day. You know, I really do think that's the difference between in the NFL, somebody being on the P squad, somebody being on the roster, somebody being on the starting team, somebody being on the Pro Bowl. You know, those little, because they're all good athletes, great athletes. They're all great athletes. Nobody gets to that level without being a great athlete.
Even on the practice squad, you're
a great athlete. And honestly, I coached some guys that on the practice squad were physically more talented than some guys that were on the team, but they didn't have that X factor. They didn't have that thing, you know, that it takes to when the game's on the line, coach sends you in.
Yeah.
You know.
Tim Grover called it closers.
Yeah.
Right? You had coolers, cleaners, and closers.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Jordan was a closer. A lot of cleaners would have thought, well, it hasn't been my game, like, let me hand it to somebody else. Closers are like, I have to be the one to do this. I'm the one that I can count on and control, and I've got this. All right, so I'm going to take this way down from talking about high elite level athletes into learning the ABCs. Like, really learning to talk and speak, and you learn the individual letters and their sounds and recognize them and put them together to make words, and the words together to make sentences, and sentence to paragraphs. That takes, what, maybe like 6 years to start kind of having an idea of what's going on. And then, you know, obviously there's still development from there, but learning how to make the correct sounds with our mouth, with our vocal cords, is a huge, difficult process that is technically simple. It's just trying to mimic those sounds over and over and over again. And pretty much everybody, less certain, you know, issues, medical concerns, that sort of thing, is able to do that. And then it's funny because we almost forget that struggle that we went through to develop that skill. As we become older and you're an adult starting self-defense, and you tend to think, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to learn this punch. And it's like, well, you learned how to speak and how to walk and how to run and how to drive and how to do all these other things. You're going to get there.
I mean, birds learn how to speak.
Yeah.
You know, the actual act of listening to sounds and then being able to mimic the sounds. There are birds on the planet that can do that, but it stops there, right?
It's a straight mimicry.
Right. They don't understand that, or there is no next step, next level. It's still the same words.
Yeah.
You know, like it's still the same set of sounds coming together to form a word or a phrase or a sentence. But then there's that next level that as humans, we hope that we're able to take that and then turn it into a series of sentences, paragraphs, you know, pages, conversation. And then we're not just necessarily mimicking back something that we've heard and we're doing it on cue as some sort of a prompt. You know, we can think outside of, well, if they say this, then I automatically respond with that.
Right.
So, I mean, that's a good example, I think, with language and birds versus humans of simple, not easy. The mimicking of the words, relatively simple. Knowing what they mean and how to put them into some sort of series that makes sense for a broader kind of conversation is not easy.
Would you say that something that is innate, like the bird being able to mimic sounds, would that be considered easy? Especially like, and I mean, this is getting a little out of the spectrum of what I say in our intro we're talking about, because mostly I'm talking humans, but if something is just in your nature and it just happens,
right,
is it easy?
Yeah.
For human and avian alike, would you say?
I mean, we don't really have to be trained to walk. We figure it out. We crawl around on things, and then we find it, and then we crawl to a thing. It's in our way, so we put our hands on it. We pull ourselves up. We recognize, oh, I can stand. And then we start to tumble and fall, and then, oh, let's try that again, and we do it. Nobody is telling us to do those things.
Right.
Now, we may see people doing them, but we don't see them do that process.
It is interesting because, yeah, it's where does that flexible thought come in? Because at no point does a child just think, this is too hard, I'm not going to keep trying. It just happens. They do it. Right. I guess breathing would kind of fall into that category. Breathing is relatively complex, but easy. Is that another side of the coin?
Yeah,
Like we don't think about breathing.
No, we don't think about it. But that's an involuntary
Yeah, that's true.
action, right? Learning to walk is like you could decide to crawl your whole life,
Yeah.
right? You could decide to not climb up on this thing and stand on two legs and fall and stand up on this thing and stand on two legs and fall and crawl up on this thing and stand on two legs and fall and do that over and over and over again until you're falling less and less and less, and then ultimately you're not falling, and then 80 years later you do the whole thing in reverse, unfortunately. So yeah, I mean, I think those things are simple, not easy, in terms of it's hard because we have to do it over and over and over again, because you're not just learning how to walk, but you're building up the muscle and structure to actually be able to do it, the posture, understanding how to balance, how to control, whatever. So it's easy in that we're hardwired to do it, you know, like we are hardwired to do lots of things. But it's not easy in that we have to be willing to continue to do it over and over and over again until we're actually successful in doing it, you know? Because, I mean, again, you could choose to never do that. Well, I guess you could. I mean, maybe you couldn't.
I was going to say, but it's still, it's interesting because it is in our nature, in how, like, as an animal, we behave and operate. We see other people doing this thing and, you know, a need for survival and that sort of thing. But we still have flexible thought.
Yeah. I mean, bears can stand up on two legs and walk on two legs, but they generally don't choose to do that. Right? They have determined that moving on four legs is more efficient. You know, they're faster, they're more mobile, more agile. So even though they can stand on, I guess, is the opposite of us.
For us, yeah. We could crawl around on four.
Right, but we're definitely not faster there.
Right. Okay, so I think this is going to be the last kind of tick in this segment, which is going to be the difference between teaching beginners and teaching advanced students. And is there a difference?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there are parts, because now you're going to get into like different types of pedagogies, because there are some things about teaching beginners that are simpler, easier. And then there are some things that about teaching more advanced people that are simpler. Because when you're teaching brand new people, you can entertain a much more progressive resistance kind of model, whereas, look, for right now, all I want you to do is this, this, and this. Don't worry about anything else. Don't think about this. Don't even ask me questions, you know, like just do these three things.
Yeah.
So from a coaching perspective, that's relatively easy in that moment in time, because I just prescribe, do these things. More advanced people, I'm doing less and less prescribing, but I'm having to recognize more and more why something is working or not working, because I'm giving them the freedom to kind of do their own thing to a degree, move the way that they want to move. And so since I'm not prescribing it anymore, I have to be more tuned in to what might be happening, why it's not successful, because they're doing it a little bit different than the person next to them. Because I'm not telling both of them to do it the exact same way.
Same thing. The nuances that change at an advanced level have to be, you really have to understand what's happening in the dynamics of the situation, versus at a beginner level, it's more broad strokes, kind of bigger picture, like, well,
and the expectations are different.
Yeah.
Beginner level, my expectations are relatively low. More advanced level, my expectations are higher with less instruction. You know, I think that's where, from my perspective anyway, and I realize that there are plenty of people that don't coach or teach or instruct this way. That's how I think it should be. The evolution, the progression is they get to where they need us less and less on a micro level and more on a kind of macro level, where it's more about decision making in real time and not the actual nuance of this foot being in this place.
Right.
You know, at higher levels, you're not talking about stance very often.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think there are simple, not easy things for both sets, for the practitioner and for the coach, because the posts have moved.
Kind of like when we talked about the white belt's the hardest belt to earn. Like, yeah, until you earn your white belt, and then the next belt is the hardest one to earn, and the next one is the hardest belt to earn.
Right.
Yeah.
It's all perspective.
As a final fun game, as a final thought, if we kind of try to tie this in together, if you have to carry 700 pounds of rocks, there are ways to make that simple, even though moving 700 pounds of rocks is never going to be easy. It's the give me 6 hours to chop down a tree and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe type of thing.
Yeah.
Where does that land within life and martial arts?
I mean, there should be, I think, a lot of prep work that goes into anything that is worth having, worth achieving, worth attaining. But then as life goes on, you start to understand and recognize that rarely do those things line up in a linear fashion. The emotional toughness side of that is recognizing when one of those things is out of place or out of order or whatever. It's not, well, guess that didn't work out, and I move on to the next thing. I just recognize that this is a moment in time, and the variables I can control are the only things that I should be really focusing on, putting any attention into, and figuring out how to get to the next step, even though maybe it's not the step that I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. I feel like relationships are one of the places where you can really see where it gets really difficult to focus on the fact that, no, this isn't easy, but it is very simple in terms of reasons why relationships end or whatever it is. There's a communication expectation. There's usually some form of pressure and expectation set on you. And when you're not navigating those things together with the other person, it gets difficult to manage.
This is maybe a whole nother topic, but there are different communication styles, right?
Yeah.
And I think the mistake that we make as humans sometimes is ascribing to another person that they're not communicating, but maybe it's just they're not communicating in the way that you communicate or the way that I communicate, because there are levels to this. This is like coaching or teaching. I can't coach everyone the same way because they all have different learning styles, different ways to motivate different people, different ways to get them to do the thing that they need to do in that moment in time. I'll have a class tonight where I'll have, a 14-year-old girl and a 78-year-old man, and I'm going to speak to them very differently in a coaching environment. And so I think it only stands to reason that that's going to carry over into other parts of life, and recognizing that I can't go into a coaching environment and be like, well, this is the way I talk to people. This is the way that I communicate.
Yeah.
This is what works for me. So I'm going to do this with everybody in the room. And anybody that can't get on my level, well, fuck them.
Well, and I'm sure there are places that run in that style.
Oh, for
I know
sure.
I know there are places that run in that style.
Yeah. But I think if you pull yourself away from it and you look at it, we can all recognize that as rational human beings that does not make sense. Not if your goal is to actually coach people.
Right. The only other thing I have was talking about King Midas and how everything he touched turned to gold.
I just want to say that this is number 3 after she said one more thing.
I mean, I have King Midas on here because everything he touched turned to gold.
Okay.
He thought that would be a great little superpower until he couldn't eat anything because it turned to gold, and he touched his daughter and she turned to gold, and so finally he got the power washed off in the river kind of thing. Because when you go for the easy solutions, they often end up complicating things more. So I guess if you're looking for your shortcut to communication tips for your spouse, your quick 3-step self-defense process, your, the 2 knife defense techniques you'll ever need, all that kind of stuff is going to create more problems than not.
Almost assuredly. There's a reason that a lot of people make a lot of money on telling other people all they have to do is.
Yeah.
It
sounds nice.
Yes. And as humans, we tend to gravitate towards that kind of mindset mentality. But I mean, I've been around a lot of high-level people in a lot of different aspects of life, and I can almost bet that none of them got there any sort of way that anybody would describe as easy.
It's funny because we do want easy, quick, microwave society solution kind of things, but we also are all acutely aware that there's no money in solutions. The guy who sells you the solution is also going to sell you a maintenance plan or a here's what to do if those things didn't work, and keep you down the rabbit hole and keep you going. You know, not to be all doom and gloom, but there's far more money in medicine than there is in cures, and we'd rather keep you on pills and coming to the doctor than here make this wholesale diet change. Our society runs on expecting people want the easy solution and knowing that it's going to be to their disadvantage.
Right. And if this one doesn't work, then don't worry, I've got another one for you.
Then right on to the next one.
Yep.
Right on to the next crystal.
Yep.
All right. That's our look at simple, not easy. If you enjoyed this discussion, you know what to do. Leave us 5 stars, interact, reviews, subscribe, all those good things. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, that's great. Do those exact same things. Thanks for listening to Second Plan A podcast, and we look forward to growing with you next time.
Thanks, everybody.